"Your brother built something real," my father said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "You're still just collecting a paycheck." He didn't even look at me when he said it. He was cutting into his steak, already moving on, like what he'd just said was as ordinary as passing the salt. My brother sat across from me, grinning at his phone. My mother adjusted the centerpiece flowers with nervous hands. The restaurant was one of those places with cloth napkins and candles in short glass holders, the kind of place my parents couldn't have walked into without my help. But that part never made it into the story they told about themselves. I set my water glass down carefully. Outside the window, the city moved the way it always does at 7 p.m. on a Friday. Headlights, umbrellas, people rushing to get somewhere warmer. I watched it for a second and thought about the email sitting in my inbox that I hadn't answered yet. The one from my bank, the one about the auto loan taken out in my name 9 months ago that I had nothing to do with. I hadn't said anything about it yet. I was still deciding how. My name is Joel. I'm 31 years old. I work in commercial lending at a regional bank in Charlotte, North Carolina. I read financial documents the way other people read menus, automatically, skimming for the things that don't add up. It's not a skill I chose. It's just what happens when you spend enough years in the job. My brother Connor is 26, 5 years younger than me, and for as long as I can remember, he has occupied a different category of existence in our family. Not better loved, exactly. That's too simple. It's more like he was treated as fragile and exceptional at the same time, the way people treat a rare plant. Overwatered and kept out of direct sunlight and praised every time it produced a single leaf. He dropped out of community college after 1 semester. My parents called it a pivot. He worked at a sporting goods store for 8 months. They said he was building character. He started a pressure washing business that lasted 1 summer, then a car detailing thing that dissolved when winter came, then something vague involving dropshipping that nobody ever fully explained. Each time, my parents described it as progress. Each time, I was the one who quietly covered what needed covering. It didn't start dramatically. These things rarely do. The first time I helped was during a medical situation. My father had a cardiac episode when I was 24, just 18 months into my job, and the bills came in faster than their insurance could process. I transferred $200 to cover the gap. I didn't think much about it. That's what you do. But the gap never really closed. It just got quieter and more expected. By the time I was 27, I was sending $800 to when $200 home, most months, sometimes more. There was always a reason. Property tax on the house, my mother's prescription, the AC unit, the truck. Connor's new opportunity that just needed a small push to get started. I sent it because saying no felt like abandoning people, and nobody had ever taught me the difference between helping and being harvested. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment off Central Avenue, with a parking spot that flooded when it rained hard. I packed lunch every day. I had 1 streaming subscription and I split it with a co-worker. I drove a 2014 Civic with 112,000 miles on it. Meanwhile, Connor posted photos from weekends in Nashville, in Myrtle Beach, new sneakers, a drone he bought for the photography business he was starting, a leather jacket that cost more than my monthly car insurance. Whenever I mentioned any of it carefully, my mother would get quiet in the way she did when she was deciding how to protect him. "He's figuring things out," she'd say. "You were always more stable than him. Sensitive. Struggling. Still finding his way." These were the words that followed my brother everywhere, like a passport that excused him from every border. I noticed things at family gatherings the way you notice a slow leak. It takes a while before you realize the floor is wet. My father asked Connor questions like he was interviewing someone impressive. He asked me questions like he was waiting for me to finish talking. When I came home for Thanksgiving 1 year, still wearing my work clothes because I'd driven straight from the office, Connor looked at my dress shirt and said, "You always look like you're about to give someone bad news." My parents laughed. I smiled and went to get more ice from the freezer, so I had somewhere to put my face for a second. The worst part was how gradual it all became. My father would call on weekday evenings, never asking how I was. There'd be a pause after I picked up, the kind of pause that meant he was organizing his ask. Then it would come, restrained but practiced. "Things are a little tight this month," or "your brother ran into something, might need a hand," or just a number, flat and specific, like I was a vendor he was placing an order with. I always said yes. Not immediately, sometimes I'd wait a day, tell myself I was thinking about it. But I always said yes. The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday night in March. I was eating leftover pasta at my kitchen counter, still in my work clothes, jacket thrown over the back of a chair. My phone lit up, my father. I picked up. The pause came, then, "Connor's getting married." I said that was great news. "We want to throw him a real wedding. Something he'll remember. You know how important this is for the family." I asked what he meant by real. Another pause. We're thinking around 18,000 for the venue, the catering, the whole thing. Your mother wants it done right. I put down my fork. $18,000. I had exactly $4,100 in savings. I was 7 months away from paying off my car. I had $23,000 left on my student loans. I had been sending money home for 6 years. I need to think about it, I said. My father's voice sharpened slightly. Just slightly. It's not like you don't have it. You make good money. I said I'd think about it. I didn't sleep well that night. I lay on my side staring at the wall and did what I always do when I can't sleep. I started running numbers in my head, not anxiously, methodically. I was accounting for my own life, and I realized I had never actually done that before. Not fully. I had been so focused on other people's financial emergencies that I had never once sat down and looked at the actual shape of the past 6 years. The next morning, I opened my laptop before work and started pulling records. I have access to my own transaction history going back 8 years. I work in lending. I know how to trace money. I started doing what I do every day at the office, except this time I was auditing my own life. In 6 years, I had transferred $67,400 to my family. I went through every transfer, every Venmo, every Zelle payment, every check. I categorized them. Mortgage help, medical utilities, Connor's various business starts, general household. I cross-referenced dates, and then I found it. In June of the previous year, there was a car loan opened in my name. A 2022 Ford F-150. $38,500. Financed through a dealership in Greensboro. Monthly payments of $680. 9 months of payments had already been processed, all from an account I had never seen before. The loan showed on my credit report under a hard inquiry I hadn't authorized. I'd noticed the credit dip months ago and assumed it was a reporting error I'd forgotten to follow up on. I sat very still for a long time. I pulled the full credit report. There was also a credit card opened 18 months prior. $500 limit. $1,700 in charges, cell phone bills, gas stations, a furniture store in Greensboro. I did not call anyone. I went to work. Over the next 3 weeks, I worked quietly. I contacted the dealership directly and requested the original application documents through a records request. I went to the credit card issuer. I filed documentation requests. I said nothing to my family. People show you more when they believe you're still asleep. What I found was this. My brother had used my information, social security number, income figure from a pay stub I'd left at the house during a Christmas visit 2 years prior to finance the truck. The credit card was opened the same week. My father's email address was listed as the secondary contact on the truck loan application. My father's email, not Connor's. I sat with that for a long time, with what it meant. That this wasn't just my brother being careless with borrowed trust. This was small enough to stay quiet, calculated enough to stay hidden. I didn't feel rage. I want to be honest about that, because people expect rage in these moments. What I felt was closer to the specific exhaustion of someone who has finally found the answer to a question they didn't know they'd been asking for years. Like, oh, this is what it was. I kept sending small amounts home in the weeks that followed, not because I still believed in them, because I was building something, and I needed them to stay calm. The wedding celebration dinner was held at a steakhouse in Concord, a private room, dark wood paneling, framed photos of racetrack memorabilia on the walls. My parents had reserved it. They couldn't afford it on their own, but no one said that out loud. My new sister-in-law, Petra, sat next to Connor in a dress that I recognized from her Instagram. Petra was fine. This was never about her. My father made a toast. He talked about Connor's perseverance, his vision, his courage to keep going after every setback. He talked about how proud he was. He mentioned my mother's patience. He did not mention me. I sat at the far end of the table holding a glass of water because I hadn't ordered wine. I thought that was funny. I was probably the only person in that room who had actually paid for the room. After the toast, my father settled back in his chair and looked at me with that look he had. The one that was almost fond, almost, like I was a dependable appliance that had never let him down. You should learn from your brother, he said. He took a risk, built something. You play it too safe. I took a breath, played it safe, 6 years, $67,000, a truck in my name I had never sat in. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket and put a folder on the table between us. My father looked at it the way people look at something that doesn't belong in their environment. He frowned, then picked it up slowly. Inside were the truck loan documents, the original application with my information, the credit report showing the inquiry date, the credit card's statements, and a single printed page summarizing 6 years of transfers with a total at the bottom. $67,400, highlighted. He turned the first page, then the second. My mother leaned over and looked. Petra was watching now. Connor had gone very still. The silence at that table was different from regular dinner silence. It had a texture. I stood up. I'm not contributing to the wedding, I said. I kept my voice even. Flat. The way I talk when I'm reviewing an application with issues. I'm also not going to let the loan situation go unaddressed. I've already spoken with an attorney. Connor knows what needs to happen next. My father looked up from the folder. His face had gone through several things quickly and had settled on something I could only describe as cornered. You're embarrassing this family, he said. His voice was low, controlled. I thought about that for a second. I've been subsidizing this family for 6 years, I said. I think I've covered my share of embarrassment. I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair and walked out of the private room. The restaurant noise hit me all at once. Voices, silverware, a busboy's cart rolling somewhere behind me. I pushed through the front door into the night air. It was cold for March, still carrying that wet chill that hangs around Charlotte until almost April. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a while without starting it. My phone lit up almost immediately. My father, then Connor, then my mother, then Connor again. I turned the phone face down on the passenger seat and looked out at the parking lot lights reflecting off the wet pavement. There's a thing that happens after a moment like that. You expect to feel powerful or righteous or at least relieved. What I mostly felt was tired. Not the grinding exhaustion I'd been carrying for years, something quieter, more final, like putting down a bag you've been holding so long. You forgot it was heavy until you set it on the ground and your arm started to ache in the release. In the following days, the family network moved the way it always does, information traveling through aunts and cousins before any of the people involved had actually processed what happened. My father's sister called me 3 days later. She started carefully, diplomatically. Halfway through the call, she said, "I didn't realize how much you'd been carrying." She said it almost to herself, like she was recalculating something. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in 2 years sent a text. It just said, "We always thought you were the difficult one." I'm sorry. My mother called on a Sunday morning. I almost didn't answer. I picked up on the last ring. She didn't open with an apology. She opened with silence, and then, "The house feels different." I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. "Your father is," she stopped. "He's not going to be the first one to call you." "I know," I said. Another silence. "Then I didn't know about the loan. I want you to know that." I sat with that for a moment. She might have been telling the truth. She might have been telling the version of the truth she'd convinced herself of. Either way, it didn't change the shape of the years before it. The calls that only came when money was needed. The birthdays that got quieter every year. The way every visit somehow cost me something. "I believe you," I said. And I did, maybe. Mostly. It doesn't fix the rest of it. She went quiet again, then said my name. Just my name, the way she used to say it when I was small and she was tucking something in around me. I didn't cry, but I had to look at the ceiling for a second. "I'm not disappearing," I told her. "But things have to change. I can't be the emergency fund anymore. I can't be the quiet one who covers everything so nobody has to feel uncomfortable." "I know," she said, very quietly. Connor never called. I wasn't surprised. The attorney I'd consulted with was straightforward about what I could and couldn't do. Identity fraud involving a family member is, legally speaking, one of the messier situations you can find yourself in. Prosecution is possible but statistically rare. What I had was leverage, documentation clear enough that Connor would be exposed if I chose to pursue it. We reached an agreement through the attorney, a written repayment schedule for the loan, with consequences documented and signed if he defaulted. It wasn't everything. It wasn't nothing. The F-150 was transferred out of my name within 6 weeks. I didn't attend the wedding. I sent Petra a card with a handwritten note that said I wished her well and meant it genuinely, because none of this was her situation to untangle. 3 months later, my apartment looks the same as it always did. Same street noise in the morning. Same coffee maker that takes too long. Same parking spot that floods when rain comes sideways. But when I open my bank account now, the number belongs entirely to me. No transfers scheduled. No amounts mentally set aside before I've even paid my own rent. It sounds like a small thing until you've spent 6 years without it. I started a savings goal. Not a big aspirational number, just a real one, the kind that doesn't get hollowed out before it builds. I put $400 aside last month for the first time in years and didn't move it. I checked the balance 3 days later just to see it still there. I sleep differently now. I don't fully know how to explain it except to say that I used to lie awake doing mental accounting, running what I owed other people against what I had, always trying to make the math work in their favor. Now I just go to sleep. It sounds unremarkable. It's the best thing that's happened to me in years. My father eventually texted. One message, 2 weeks after the dinner. It said, "You made your choice. Hope it was worth it." I read it and put my phone in my pocket and went back to the report I was reviewing at my desk. I didn't respond, and I noticed something interesting. I didn't feel guilty about not responding. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel guilty about choosing myself. I just felt steady. My mother and I have spoken twice since that Sunday call. Short conversations. Careful. Like people learning to walk on new ground without testing every step. I don't know where it goes from here. I'm not trying to know yet. Some things need to move at their own pace before you can decide what they are. What I know is this. I spent 6 years believing that being useful was the same as being loved. I confused reliability with belonging. I thought that if I stayed quiet enough, helpful enough, uncomplaining enough, eventually it would be recognized. That one day the scales would balance and someone would say, without me prompting them, "We see what you've been doing and it matters." That day was never coming. Not because they were monsters. People who take from the people closest to them aren't always doing it consciously. Sometimes it's just what they were taught to accept. Sometimes it's easier to need someone than to protect them. But easier for them isn't a reason for you to keep handing over your life. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. About the difference between being a good son and being a financial instrument that a family organizes itself around. About how long I mistook one for the other. About the specific cruelty of being criticized by the same people you've been quietly keeping afloat. My father said I play it too safe. I transferred $67,000 to my family over 6 years, while eating packed lunches and driving a car with 6-digit mileage, and skipping vacations and splitting streaming subscriptions with coworkers. I don't think safe was ever the right word for any of that.